everybody. My name is Jane Simpkiss. I am the Curator of Art at Leamington Spa Art Gallery and Museum in Leamington Spa, which is located in the Royal Pump Rooms. And I'm really pleased to be here this evening talking to you all about our art collection, thanks to the wonderful Art UK. So as part of this talk, I'm going to be doing a kind of whistle-stop tour through the collections, through the art collections at Leamington Spa, looking particularly at the oil paintings which we have featured on the wonderful Art UK website. Leamington Spa Art Gallery and Museum is where you can see the collections of Warwick District Council. So this is our lovely building here, the Royal Pump Rooms. We have been building our collection since the 1860s, and it now contains over 12,500 objects, spanning visual arts, decorative arts, local and social history, ethnography, archaeology, and also numismatics, so coins and medals. So we've got kind of two parts. We've got the museum side of things, and then we've also got the art gallery side of things. And these objects tell stories from across the globe and from many different periods of history. And in my role as the Fine Art Curator, I oversee the care and display of the fine art, including paintings, works on paper, sculpture, and I also oversee the temporary exhibition programme at the gallery. So the collections at Leamington Spa Art Gallery and Museum have their foundations in the pictures and museum specimens that were donated to the Leamington Free Public Library, as I said, in the 1860s. And later on in the 19th century, the collection became sufficiently well established to cause the library to separate from the museum, and overcrowding of the kind of library space led to the creation of an art gallery extension, which was built in 1928. So we say that the Leamington Spa Art Gallery and Museum opened in 1928. However, we didn't actually move to this current location, the Royal Pump Rooms, until 1999. And prior to the arrival of the gallery and museum, the Royal Pump Rooms, as the name might suggest, had a long history as a place to enjoy the curative properties of the town's spa water. The pump rooms were actually built in 1814, after spa mineral water was found on the site in 1810. And spa water was available to drink in the building, and hot and cold spa baths were available to use. By 1863, the pump rooms were seen as old-fashioned and were remodelled, which included the building of a swimming pool, and actually later on a second swimming pool, and also a Turkish hammam. And that has been restored, the Turkish hammam, and you can actually see that still in our building today, although the swimming pools have been covered up subsequently, and are now the location of the museum and art gallery. During the 20th century, the Pump Rooms was actually an NHS hydrotherapy centre, and where the main art gallery today was where the therapeutic pool was. And the Art Gallery Museum opened in 1999. And the history and the history of the building and the town can be explored in our museum displays. But today I'm here to focus on the gallery side of things, and particularly our art collection, looking at, as I've said, some of the significant oil paintings in our collection. We've got around 400 oil paintings in our collection out of approximately 2,000 works of art. The majority of these works are British and date from the 19th and 20th century, and have been the result of generous donors to the gallery and museum, particularly an alderman of the town called Alfred Holt, who gave and bequeathed a number of significant paintings to the gallery during the 20th century. We also have a small but significant collection of 17th century paintings from the Dutch Republic, which we received during the second half of the last century through Art Fund and also private bequests. We continue to acquire artwork and develop our collection of Victorian, modern and contemporary British art, often with a focus on local Warwickshire artists. And we also collect works which strengthen our existing European art collection. And also due to the building's history as a place to take the waters and also to swim, we have various sub-themes of collecting, focusing on contemporary art, on a medical theme, and also on the theme of health and swimming. And we use these works to explore the relationship between visual art, social history, and science. So, as part of my talk, I have chosen 6 artworks which span the 17th century to the 21st. And kind of pick out some of the highlights of our collection. And actually the first picture that I want to look at is my favourite in the collection and one I've been doing a lot of research on recently. And it's one of the real masterpieces of our Dutch painting collection. And that is Abraham Bloemaart's The Prodigal Son. And that is what you can see on the screen right now. It dates from 1615, and it's one of the oldest and largest paintings in our collection. And it's often described as the best work by the artist in a British collection. So Abraham Bloemaart isn't a household name, but he is a highly significant artist, particularly for the development of Dutch landscape painting. And that in turn has actually had a huge role in determining the style of landscapes that we see, particularly in Britain in the 18th and 19th centuries. And so what you can see here on the screen is a farmyard, and we've got various individuals going about their daily lives. So we have a woman right at the back who's feeding chickens. We've got several men fixing a fence, another man up in the tree, probably cutting smaller pieces of wood for the fireplace. And then right in the centre, we have got 2 women, one who's slightly kind of hard to decipher, but is probably breastfeeding, and another who is holding a plate and a jug. And for me, and I think for many of our visitors, this painting is a wonderful window into the past, not only a beautiful object in and of itself, but also a testament of what life was like to some extent in the 17th century Dutch Republic. And like many paintings from the 17th century, this painting is a depiction of the everyday, and probably a working farm on Bloemaart's, in Bloemaart's home province in the Netherlands of Utrecht. Now, there's one figure that I haven't mentioned, and that is actually the figure who is the individual who the work is named after, and that is the Prodigal Son. So we can see him on the right-hand side of this image. He's kneeling down, he's got a hand to his chest, and he is by a trough and some pigs. And it's very interesting that actually, despite the fact that this is a depiction of the parable of the prodigal son, which is one of the morality tales which Jesus tells in the Bible, the prodigal son is only a very small part of this image. And now this is the moment in the story where the prodigal son has asked for his inheritance early from his father, and he's completely squandered it on wine, women, and song, and has so much so that he has to take a job as a swineherd on a farm, and realizes that his life has reached such a low point that he actually envies the pigs, their existence. And this is the very moment that he realizes really the terrible mistakes that he's made, and he repents. And Bloemaart has depicted a beam of light coming from the top left-hand side of the image, breaking through the kind of overcast dark clouds and travelling diagonally across the image to shine onto the prodigal son, and really symbolising God's forgiveness of him. And later on in the story, he returns home to his family and is welcomed with open arms. But as I've said, whilst this is the title and the supposed subject of the image, Bloemaart actually prioritises the depiction of everyday life. And it's probably to highlight the relevance of this story to contemporary viewers and to encourage them to apply these teachings to their lives. So this is not set in the Middle East, in where the Bible takes place, but this is actually taking place for the visitors in their lives, in a place that they can relate to. And the balance of landscape versus subject also really highlights Bloemaart's interest in this genre, and particularly in farmscapes as an artist. And what I find so fascinating about this artist is that there is an incredible number of sketches that are still in existence that Bloomberg made whilst he was travelling around Utrecht. And he drew the kind of tumbled down farmhouses, the gnarled trees, peasants going about their daily life. And then he used these sketches to create his compositions for his paintings. And by kind of combining these images, he wasn't making a direct depiction of a known place, but was kind of combining realistic elements to make something seem familiar. And actually, he is one of the first Dutch artists to combine images that he has seen in the real world into these kind of into these farmscapes. And in doing so, he really paves the way for how landscape in the 17th century would be depicted. So for me, this is one of our best paintings and one of my favourites, and it's currently on display in the gallery, which is wonderful. We have a number of other Dutch works in the collection, and I just wanted to highlight a few of those here. I don't have time to talk about them all, but here we've got another masterpiece, a self-portrait by the artist Godfried Schalken, who specialised in candlelit works, and this is, as I said, a self-portrait actually produced when he travelled to London in the 17th century. And then we've got a beautiful two works which are attributed to artists. The top work to an artist called Adam Willets, a naval, a seascape showing pilgrims arriving, and at the bottom a beautiful work after the artist Jan van Kessel, a basket of flowers, which is incredibly small and actually painted on a piece of copper. A really minute, beautiful object, which would have been appreciated perhaps in a wealthy merchant's cabinet of pictures. So from the 17th century, we're going to jump on a little bit to the 19th century and explore some of the images which represent a very exciting holding of works by artists that we have termed modern pre-Raphaelites. So on the screen, we've got two works by an artist called Frederick Cayley Robinson. On the left, an oil painting called In a Wood So Green, and on the right, a in tempera work where he's actually used egg yolk, mixing the pigments with egg yolk in a method we call tempera. So it's tempera on board, and you can already see kind of stylistic similarities between these two works by the same artist in the kind of the length of the female figures and the male figures in this work, these kind of incredibly long elongated forms. So Frederick Cayley Robinson was working at the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century, and we have a number of works by him in the collection. And he was recently one of the major artists featured in an exhibition that we held at the gallery from May to September 2022, entitled Modern Pre-Raphaelite Visionaries. And this show was one of the largest kind of shows that we've done at the gallery recently. We had a number of loans from across the country, and it explored the work of these artists, including Cayley Robinson, who were working at the turn of the century, British artists working at the turn of the century and grappling with the changing modern world around them. And whilst many artists that you may be familiar with in this period were captivated by the modern art coming out of France, with the Impressionists and Post-Impressionists, these artists actually were looking back to the works of the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, which was founded in 1848 by artists you may be familiar with, Dante Gabriel Rossetti, Millet, William Holman Hunt. And these artists, the Pre-Raphaelites, sought to return to the bright colours and compositions of art from the Italian Quattrocento, so that is the late Middle Ages and the early Renaissance. And in particular, they often included a kind of focus on folklore and fairy tale. And so you can see in these works by Cayley Robinson, who was looking back at the Pre-Raphaelite ideas, the kind of references to myths, legends, and the medieval. So on the left, we've got this chivalric knight on white horseback travelling through kind of what almost seems like an enchanted woodland. He's got this bright golden armour on and this kind of halo around his head. And then we've got this fair maiden very red hair, something that the Pre-Raphaelites were included in lots of their imageries, almost slightly Celtic in the colouring of her clothes. And many people are unfamiliar with artists like Frederick K. Robinson, because they have often been overlooked by art history, who art historians have often dismissed these artists as old-fashioned and outdated, that they were looking backwards rather than forwards at this kind of this moment of change in British art. But actually, in our exhibition, we argued that these artists were actually incredibly modern. And so whilst we have some of these more Victorian motifs in these works, Robinson infuses many of his pictures with a kind of eerie sense of mystery, unexplained light sources, interrupted compositions, which create an unsettled, ambiguous atmosphere. So on the right-hand side image, The Farewell, we've got this light coming out of a hole in the wall, perhaps a window, but we don't know where it's coming from. And the figures kind of are clutching each other, perhaps a kind of loving embrace, but also, is there an element of fear there? It's all very uncertain, and fascinatingly, the artist has given over a massive amount of attention to the depiction of the stone wall. That's almost the main character in the image. And in A Wood So Green, we've got the images very much chopped up by these tree trunks. So Robinson's works actually tap into very modern ideas, the ideas of psychology and spirituality, which were of great interest at the turn of the 20th century to artists and scholars alike. And his work, whilst it kind of took on the colours and symbols of Pre-Raphaelitism, it was blended with ideas of the European symbolist movement and these current preoccupations with kind of the inner world, the imagination, to create something that actually was uniquely modern. And so I just wanted to flag up these two works in our collection, because I think they are they help to tell a story that perhaps we don't really appreciate in the kind of wider understanding of British art. And an examination of them really helps us to appreciate that the first decades of the 20th century were a period of profound transition, which wasn't just a wholesale adoption of modern ideas, but really was a blending of old and new. So from the kind of disturbing works of K. Robinson, we move to one of our most beloved pictures in the gallery. It's a constant favourite with our visitors. It's very often commented upon, and when it's not on display, we have a number of. It's often requested to be put back up as soon as possible. So this is Winter's White Silence, and it is by the artist Lucy Kemp Welsh. It was painted between 1923 and 1924. And Lucy Kemp Welsh was one of the most renowned horse painters of the 20th century, and she produced monumental canvases depicting working horses and particularly showcasing the role of horses in the First World War. Kemp Welsh is also very well known because she illustrated the 1915 edition of Black Beauty. So horses were a very central part of her work. It has, however, her work has kind of been increasingly overlooked in the later 20th century, but it's being kind of reappraised now. And she was actually very well known and well respected early on in the 20th century. Interestingly, one of her paintings, which is entitled Colt Hunting in the New Forest, was the first work acquired by the Chantry bequest for the Tate by a woman. So she was a very significant female artist. And as part of my work at the gallery, we've really been trying to champion the works of female artists in the collection. So because she was a woman, Kemp Welsh was unable to pursue a role as a war artist in the First World War in the same way as her male contemporaries. She wasn't able, for example, to go over to France, but she depicted a lot of cavalry training, and this allowed her to really capture her experience of her understanding of the war, and provides a fascinating insight into this period. Now, this image actually dates from after the war, and it reflects Kemp Welsh's interest in the declining role of horses at a time of increasing industrialisation in Britain. So as horses were no longer being seen as regularly because they weren't being used in the same industries and in the same way that they might have been done in her childhood. And interestingly, Kemp Welsh actually did a lot of her sketching for her work from horseback. She was a very accomplished horsewoman. And in this work, I think that kind of interest is really summed up by the fact that the people are almost irrelevant. They are very much a kind of a side interest to the main event, which is these incredibly beautiful, powerful horses moving across the work. And we've got this light reflecting off the snow, which I think highlights, interestingly, Kemp Welsh's interest in the works of the post-impressionists and the impressionists before them at this time. So we've got this incredible, beautiful light bouncing off the snow. So from one female artist to another, we have a number of paintings of female artists in the collection. And as I've said, we've been really trying to champion and celebrate their stories. And whilst working with the collection, I became very interested in the vast array of paintings that we had by women that depicted flowers. So here we've got a beautiful example by the artist Winifred Nicholson. And it's set in Cornwall, which is where Winifred Nicholson spent an important part of her life. She was very much associated with the St Ives group. And Nicholson considered flowers to be the perfect subject to encapsulate kind of modern ideas about painting that were developing during the early part of the 20th century. And she thought that their unruly bursts of colour and the kind of naturally abstract, uncontrollable geometry really allowed her to tap into these modern ideas of painting. So in many of her works, which you may be familiar with, she depicts bunches of flowers in the foreground, often on tables or windowsills, and uses the colour to kind of activate the surroundings around them and really make the image sing. And interestingly here, the flowers are actually in a flower bed, and in the same way kind of enliven the Cornish landscape beyond. I've got a couple of quotes here from Nicholson, which I really like. Nicholson stated that, "I like painting flowers. I have tried to paint many things in many different ways, but my paintbrush always gives a tremor of pleasure when I let it paint a flower." And so she really considered flowers to be inspirational, stating that they will show how to turn light into rainbows. And as I've just said, that Nicholson really saw flowers as an incredibly modern subject, but actually for many contemporary critics, they were too traditional. And until recently, Nicholson's work has really been underappreciated and often overshadowed by the work of her colleagues and particularly her husband, Ben Nicholson. So as a curator, I became increasingly interested in why women have often been restricted to painting flowers and how this subject has affected the way their art has been perceived. And this was the driving force for an exhibition that we held earlier this year, which was entitled Outgrowing, and which traced this phenomenon through the collection from 1700 to the present day, and included these two works as well, which I just wanted to show, which on the left, we've got a beautiful work by Vanessa Bell, showing a vase of flowers on a windowsill looking out over Venice. And then on the right, an artist who is not very well known beyond Leamington, a local artist called Elizabeth Whitehead, who specialised in still life, but whose works are perhaps not very well known because her kind of domestic duties and the limitations placed on her as a female artist kind of prevented her really from getting her name out there perhaps as much. But a really beautiful example of her work, Peony, is there on the right. So far, we've mainly looked at works in our collection of national and international significance, but we've not, until Elizabeth Whitehead, really touched on a really important aspect of our collection, which is representing art by artists from the local area. And so with these last two works, I really wanted to look at some internationally celebrated artists with a Leamington connection. So the first up is the renowned abstract artist Terry Frost. And we are lucky to have a wide variety of works by Frost in our collection. So these include oil paintings. So we've got one here, orange and blue, and then on the next slide, a work, Madrigal, and another work, Orange Umber. But we also have a number of lithographs, works on paper, ceramics and sculpture. And Frost's work is often typified by these large blocks of vibrant colour kind of juxtaposed into patterns and forms. And Frost was born in Leamington. He had a number of jobs around the town after he left school, including working in a bakery and working in a bike shop. And whilst he attended evening classes in art as a teenager, it wasn't actually until he became a soldier in the Second World War that he really began to follow art as a profession. So it was after he was made a prisoner of war in Germany that he was encouraged to pursue art professionally by a fellow prisoner who was the artist Adrian Heath. And he trained at Camberwell School of Art, and like Nicholson, was associated with the St Ives group in Cornwall. And he loved the vibrant colours of the Cornish landscape, and like many artists in the area, was highly inspired by the light of the region. And whilst his bright and colourful works are mainly abstract, they are often suggestive of the boats and coastline and light of Cornwall. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about this work here on the left, Madrigal, which is a really unusual work because of the kind of darkness of the colours. And this is actually quite an early work of Frost's, made whilst he was still a student. And it's significant because it highlights Frost's kind of early move towards abstraction, away from figurative work, and towards the kind of influence of his art school tutor Victor Passmore. And the title was based on the 1935 poem O Lurcher Loving Collier by W.H. Auden, the famed poet, which was originally published under the title A Madrigal. So Frost painting was a kind of intuitive reaction to this poem. And the work is much darker than these other images, so the one on the right and the first one that we looked at here. And here looking not at the light of Cornwall, but actually at the kind of dark tones inspired by the poem's reference to coal mining. So our collection is a really useful and important way to kind of examine the nature of Frost's career and also kind of how it changed over time. So we always have works by Terry Frost on display in the collection if you ever come to visit us. So the final work that I just wanted to talk about is a work by the artist Harry Weinberger, also a local Leamington artist. This is actually a work produced towards the end of Weinberger's career. It's painted in 2000, and it's quite unusual that we know the exact date of the work, because Weinberger was very famous for kind of refusing to date his work. So this is one of the only paintings in the collection that by Weinberger that we know the exact date of. So Weinberger lived in Leamington from 1969 until his death in 2009. And he was a principal lecturer in painting at Lanchester Polytechnic, which is now Coventry University. And he taught there from 1964 to 1983. And again, a perhaps underappreciated artist. He's kind of historically been overlooked because he was very much committed to the painting traditions of the early 20th century. So he was looking to Impressionism, Post-Impressionism and Fauvism, kind of really looking at, particularly in his works, bright and vibrant colour. And this was in the 60s and 70s when other artists were exploring kind of more conceptual forms of art. And ironically, Coventry became a really important centre for British conceptual art, which is where Weinberger was teaching. So he remained committed to these traditional approaches of drawing and painting. And he said that he found that much of present day art is inaccessible to many people. This has always troubled me. I want my work to exist in the timeless tradition of painting. And in this work, Weinberger abstracts a wintry view of Hampstead Heath, and I think does tap into that timeless view of painting. Really capturing how the light undulates across the snowy landscape and creating almost a sculptural landscape out of a fairly flat location, and kind of really exploring how light, colour and form work together. The dynamic blocks of vibrant colour and the loose brushstrokes in this work seek to inspire an emotional, imaginative response in the viewer. And Weinberger said of the work that he really wanted to retain the kind of elemental freshness that you got from kind of working drawings, uniting colour and imagination on the canvas. So many of his works were actually based on drawings and sketches made on his journeys, which he took to kind of record the world around him, fracturing kind of these everyday scenes like a snowy day on Hampstead Heath into blocks of intense colour. So we reached the end of my talk. I hope you've enjoyed this whistle-stop tour around some of the highlights of the collection. In this talk, I really only scratched the surface of what we have on offer at Leamington Spa. So do please come and visit us to see more of our wonderful collection. We are completely free to enter, even our exhibitions, and kind of from 17th century paintings to contemporary video art, 19th century sketchbooks to modern sculpture, as well as our local and social history collection. We know there's something for everyone to enjoy. So we really look forward to you coming to visit us.